That's a good question. The 33rd Summit basically is the culmination of the chairmanship of Singapore for ASEAN in 2018. And so this is the final major activity that will happen. And after this 33rd ASEAN Summit, Singapore will be officially turning over their chairmanship to Thailand, who will be the chairman for next year. So this is a major event. And the presence of the Philippine President Duterte, is really to show our support for both Singapore and Thailand. And last year, when we were the chair, the other ASEAN countries were very supportive of us. So it is good that we also show them our support. The major activities that will be that the President will attend is, of course, the opening ceremony for the 33rd ASEAN Summit, the related plenary meetings, and the difference between the 32nd and the 33rd, the one in April and the one today, this week, is because in April it was just the ASEAN countries. Now it's ASEAN plus our so-called dialogue partners, so as well as the East Asian Summit partners. So there are a lot more countries participating. So aside from the 33rd ASEAN Summit, the President will also be attending the second RCEP Summit, the 13th East Asia Summit, and as well as some other meetings with our dialogue partners. So there's a lot of meetings, and on the side there will also be bilateral meetings with individual countries, because for example, the Russian president is attending, President Putin, and there will be representatives from China, from the US, and so on. So there will be opportunities for President Duterte to meet up with them and discuss relevant issues with them. Now, as to what are the key topics that are of interest, of importance to the Philippines, number one is, of course, our concern about migrant rights and migration. So that has been one of our important topics that we push for ASEAN, and that continues to be an important topic. Number two is, of course, yung South China Sea. So we are negotiating, ASEAN is negotiating a code of conduct with China on the South China Sea, West Philippine Sea. So that is also an important thing to be looking at. And of course, the RCEP, which is a free trade agreement among key countries in around the world, that is something that is being pushed hard as well. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like that it will be signed this year, but I think the target will be to try to sign it hopefully by next year. RCEP is actually a grouping. If you're familiar with the TPP was a grouping of different countries in the world, led initially by the US to work out free trade among them. I think, I forget now how many countries they were exactly, maybe 20, 21. And the US eventually dropped out when President Trump was elected. He chose not to continue the participation of the TPP. So RCEP is a similar program, except it's a grouping of slightly different countries involved. China, for example, is not part of TPP, but it will be part of RCEP. And the Philippines as well, we're not part of TPP, but we will be part of RCEP. So if RCEP is eventually signed, then it will actually open up a very large grouping of countries who will be enjoying more free trade among themselves. So that will hopefully, and the reason why we're doing it is because hopefully it will generate jobs, create wealth and development for the participants in that RCEP. The theme chosen by Singapore for their year, actually, when they were the chairman, is really resilience and innovation. So their emphasis on resilience is basically to say, okay, they want ASEAN as a whole to be able to be resilient, to be able to adapt to changes, as well as to adjust to things like natural or man-made disasters. So there was the emphasis of resilience. Innovation, the reason they're tied up, resilience and innovation, is because they're saying resilient, the world is changing. There's a lot of new strategic as well as economic challenges. The whole multilateral economic system in the world is being questioned. There's trade friction between China and the US. So all of these are changing circumstances that ASEAN as a whole should adjust, learn to adjust to. So kaya there's a need for this resilience. And at the same time, there's also a lot of disruption coming from technology. So all this technological disruption, artificial intelligence, cyber terrorism, cyber security, all these are important. So they want ASEAN to be able to innovate using technology and then to make their economies more resilient so that kung may disruption man, it will be able to adjust and be able to, if there are jobs lost in some areas, we'll be able to replace them with more technologically advanced areas. Actually, when the president came last time, there was really a lot of interest by the Singapore businessmen, and that continues to be the case, no? So that's why there was a business forum in which those MOUs were signed, getting commitments of $180+ million commitment to invest in the Philippines. And that interest continues because the Philippines still generates a very strong growth rate. No? Our GDP still grows very strongly, above 6%. We're targeting 6 to 7%. And so the Singaporeans are aware of that. In fact, all the Singaporean businessmen that I meet, they all say, oh, the Philippines is so growing so strongly. No? So, in fact, Enterprise Singapore, which is the government agency in Singapore that promotes Singaporean companies to go abroad and invest abroad, told me a couple of weeks ago that they in fact already sponsored about 5 or 6 business delegations to the Philippines composed of different industries looking at investing in the Philippines. So there continues to be very strong interest to invest in the Philippines. Even our embassy here, we facilitated at least 3 delegations who wanted to go to the Philippines to study various investment opportunities. And these are not only big companies, but also even yung mga SMEs nila, they're also interested to go because they know that our consumer market is very strong. We have a young population, and we have a growing and strong middle class. So they all want to take advantage of that. So this is one of the initiatives of Singapore as chair. They wanted to set up this network of smart cities. So in the Philippines, well, each country in ASEAN was requested to nominate the countries that they want to participate in it. And the countries nominated in the cities nominated in the Philippines was Manila, Cebu, and Davao. Now, what this ASEAN network of smart cities is in fact, it's really a platform where all these cities can get together, work together, collaborate with each other, compare notes, learn from each other, learn what are the different practices that they are doing that they can learn from each other. So, for example, Singapore is very advanced in certain things like traffic management and also their policing, their crime prevention, and so on, using technology, using cameras, using facial recognition, using artificial intelligence. So those are things that they're willing to share with the other participants in this smart city network. So in the Philippines, we stand to gain by being part of this network, and we can learn what are the things that they do, which we can also apply. And they also, by being part of the network, we also get exposed to other parties, private sector, who are in the business of providing technology for smart cities. So they get to know about our cities as well, what are our requirements, and then they are able to supply and upgrade the capabilities of our cities. Well, I think basically naman, our OFWs here, the Filipinos living and working here in Singapore, have enjoyed basically, I think, quite a comfortable, secure presence here in Singapore. And the Singapore government continues to improve the conditions for our OFWs here. And our embassy coordinates closely with the Ministry of Manpower as well as other ministry of the government to improve the conditions of our OFWs here. But basically what I'm saying is I think the government of Singapore is very proactive in terms of protecting and promoting the welfare of our people here. And in the very few instances where there are, for example, reported abuses by employers of our domestic workers, the Singapore government actually acts on the complaints. So if we file a complaint, if the OFW files a complaint, the police will actually look into it. And there have been several cases already this year where employers were actually sent to prison for abuses against their domestic workers. Not necessarily Filipino OFWs, but OFWs, I mean Filipinos, domestic workers in general. Yeah. Well, I think in terms of what we can give in exchange is I think very much already what we are doing, which is we provide a lot of very well qualified and trained people to work in Singapore. So more and more, about 60% of our OFWs here now in Singapore are professionals and skilled workers. And lately, I've noticed that there has been also increase of IT or technology qualified people coming to Singapore to work. So we're already doing that, and I'm sure Singapore is looking to see how they can tap more of that to help them develop further in their economy, you know, and their technology side, because they really are very keen and they really have identified that technology is really the future, and they really want to be way ahead of everybody in that regard. Now, from our point of view, what we can offer Singapore really is, I think what they can learn from us, I mean, is that the Philippines, well, number one, we can offer there, of course, our large market. I think Singapore has always said that their main drawback is that they're a small country, small island, small population. So all of the government's push has always been to get them to invest outside. And the Philippines is, as we said, is a fast-growing market and has lots of opportunities for them to come in. And many of the Singaporean companies are already looking at it. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I just saw a message which said that identified the Philippines as the #1 investment destination in the world by U.S. World Magazine. So I think so. It's not only Singapore that will have the opportunity to invest in the Philippines and to tap into our growth, but also other countries will be looking at it. So we can offer that opportunity to them. Their companies can come in and tie up and help us upgrade our technology in terms of business, property management, for example, and so on. One of the key projects that a Singapore company has gone into recently is this new Clark City. The BCDA has actually contracted Surbana Jurong, which is one of the biggest planning companies in the world, to help them implement the master plan for New Clark City. So that's one thing where we can learn from Singapore. The other one is, of course, Changi Airport actually has been tapped as the technical partner for the consortium that's proposing to redevelop NAIA. So that is something also where they can help us in our technology. FOS is an organization which promotes the welfare of the OFWs here, especially yung mga domestic workers, by giving them training. And this training program takes different specializations. So there's cooking, culinary skills, there's caregiving skills, and so on. Skills that will improve their abilities and their skills, and that they will be able to put to better use, put to good use, either here in Singapore or when they go home. And FOS has been around since 1992, and over that period of time, they have trained thousands of domestic workers. And this is basically done by a dedicated volunteer group of people who spend their weekends and their free time to teach the domestic workers the skills. And TESDA recently has also come in terms of giving exams to the people who have passed the FOS training, and if they pass the TESDA exam, then they will be considered as if they had also taken the TESDA training in the Philippines, and will be accorded the same type of recognition in the Philippines when they go home. Basically, my message to the Filipino community here in Singapore and elsewhere is that the 33rd ASEAN Summit is taking place next week in Singapore, and the Philippines, as a founding member of ASEAN, is always a leader in the community, and I think that it behooves us to give our continued support to ASEAN, because in the last 50 years that ASEAN has been in existence, it really has transformed the region from one that has been in fact tense and in danger of having actual conflicts with each other into a region of peace and prosperity. So ASEAN has been good for the region, and I think we should continue to give it our total support. And for our kababayans here in Singapore, the Philippine Embassy is here, always ready to give you assistance in whatever you need. We're here, we're committed to our mandate of promoting the welfare of our OFWs and protecting their rights. Thank you very much. Magandang hapon po.